Welcome to Too Fond of Books. My name is Janelle and this is a reading roundup. In this video I'm going to talk about the books that I've been reading recently with you and let you know what I've thought about them. So the first book I want to talk about is Buried by Lynda Laplante. I got this book off of NetGalley and it actually came out at the end of April. And I really enjoyed this book. It's the first book in a new series that she's coming out with. And I hope that there are more in the series. I quite enjoyed it and I enjoyed the characters and I'd like to see what happens with them. So in this story, it opens, the prologue is set in 1994 and we meet a group of women who all have, it seems, questionable backgrounds. Some definitely criminal backgrounds, some maybe or just maybe questionable. So we meet this group of women: Esther, Dolly, Angela, Connie, Julia, Kathleen, and Gloria. And then chapter 1 opens in present day with some detectives outside of a burnt out cottage. Rose Cottage has been burnt down and a body has been discovered inside. Then we move to London and discover we get introduced to a team at the Met in London led by DCI Ridley, and our main character for this series is DC Jack Warr. I think that's how you say his name, W-A-R-R. He has just recently moved to London with his girlfriend, so he's the new member on the team. And this team gets sent out to Rose Cottage to investigate. There's a body in the cottage, but they also discover some money that has been burnt. And this money has a connection to a train robbery from the 90s, the largest train robbery in the country where millions of dollars were stolen, and this money that was found burnt is from that train robbery. And so I really like this trope of a current case being connected to a cold case. I quite enjoy that, and this book is an example of that trope done really well. So you get just snippets throughout the book of the past, with these characters from the past and what may have happened, while the current team are investigating this body in the cottage. So the main character is Jack, and he is an intriguing character. He is adopted. You find that out right away. You also find out he gets, in the middle of this investigation, he gets a call from his mom saying that they need to speak to him, and he finds out that his father has been diagnosed with terminal cancer and only has months to live. So Jack has to make decisions between spending time with his father, dealing with the fact that his father is dying, and his job, investigating this case. And so you get that right away, this struggle that he has between family and work, which is very interesting. But you also discover through all of that the fact that he is adopted, and he starts to learn a little bit more about his birth mother, and he tries to discover some information about his birth father. That information has been hidden from him, or he just doesn't know who his birth father is, and he starts to become very interested in that. So he starts running this parallel investigation of trying to discover who his birth father is while also running this investigation, and there seems to be somewhere a bit of a connection, because his birth mother had connections to criminals and questionable acquaintances. But aside from that, we also start to discover that Jack is one of those people who maybe hasn't quite figured out what kind of cop he wants to be, even what kind of person he wants to be. And he is a very complex character, and that makes it very interesting. Now, in general, I like black and white when it comes to mysteries, and especially when it comes to police procedurals. I totally think that there is right and wrong and the right way to do things, and I firmly believe in justice. But I also recognize that that's maybe not as interesting to read about, and Jack is definitely one of those gray characters. And so as I was reading this book, I was thinking that it's going to be interesting to see how he develops as a police officer, because right now, he straddles the line between doing his job well, being a man that his team can trust and that the people in his personal life can depend on. And then on the other side, someone who is maybe willing to cross the line when necessary to get the job done or to do what he thinks is right. It's such a slippery slope, and you're not sure if he's gonna fall on that slippery slope. And that's what makes him a really interesting character. So I really enjoyed this book. There were themes of underestimating people, the baggage that we carry through life, and the struggle between nature and nurture. So I really enjoyed this book. I gave it 4 stars, and I am looking forward to more in this series from Lynda Laplante. I've also read recently Blackwater Lilies by Michel Bussi. This is a book I heard about from Jane Catherine on Books. She talked about this book, she loved it, and she made me interested enough to pick it up. This has been translated from the French. This book came out in 2011, and it was translated into the English in 2016 by Sean Whiteside. This is a book that is set in Giverny in France, in the town that is home to the famous artist Claude Monet, and the gardens where he painted his water lilies. And this book was great. I really enjoyed this one as well. I also gave it 4 stars, and I counted it in my Around the World challenge for France. So this book opens with someone describing 3 women. And the opening prologue is intriguing. 3 women are described, all different ages, and it's let you as the reader are let known that the events of this book take place in 12 days, 13 days. Let me double check. Yeah, 13 days. And only one of those women will escape. The other 2 would have to die. And so it's such an intriguing prologue. 3 women lived in a village. The first was mean, the second a liar, and the third an egotist. It's great. And it says, it lasted 13 days, long enough for an escape. 3 women lived in a village. The third was the most intelligent, the second the most cunning, the first the most determined. In your opinion, which one managed to escape? The third, the youngest, was called Fanette Morel. The second was called Stephanie Dupin. The first, the oldest, that was me. So it's narrated by the third woman, the older woman. She's in her 80s in this story. And it was really well done. You got to hear from all 3 of these women. Well, the one of them was 11, so I guess she's still a girl. But I really enjoyed this. I thought it was very well written. And I'm proud to say I guessed. I guessed what was happening, and but it was really well written, and so it could have easily gone the other way. And so I love books that are complicated enough that there was a good chance that I may not have guessed it. But the minute I did, I actually said it out loud. I said, "Oh, I got it!" And I ran to tell my husband. I was like, "Oh, I totally figured out what's gonna happen in this book." And so it was very enjoyable. So I really liked Blackwater Lilies by Michel Bussi. And then I read Spitfire. This is the first book by, I totally just almost dropped it, by M.L. Huie. and it's set just immediately after World War II. And this was also a very interesting book. I gave this 4 stars as well. In this book, we meet Livy Nash, and it's VE Day 1946 in London. And we find out that Livy Nash was part of the SOE during the war, and she had some pretty terrible experiences over in France during the war. And she is now living her life, proofreading a column in a newspaper, and basically spending the evenings getting as drunk as she can so that she can sleep. And so she obviously is a tortured soul, has not recovered from what happened to her during the war. And she ends up meeting Ian Fleming, and he asks her to go back to France to track down the traitor who killed the only man she ever loved. So when she was with the SOE, she got sent over to France, and she worked with a group of people. Some of them were resistance fighters in France, and the leader of their group was a man called Peter. And they got betrayed, and there was a traitor in their group, and her and Peter got arrested, and Peter got killed, and she only managed to escape because the Americans bombed the place where she was being kept by the Germans. And so she gets sent over to find that traitor, and kind of Ian Fleming gives her a chance to maybe get some closure and find out the truth. And it was good. It was complicated. Livy Nash is a complex character, and I quite enjoyed it. Yeah, I gave it 4 stars. So if you like World War II books, you get a lot about the war, even though this takes place immediately after. If you like spy novels, there's a lot of that, because when she goes back over to France, she discovers that it is a world changed, that the war that is now being fought, it's the beginnings of the Cold War, and it's a much different type of fight than she was used to. So if you like spy novels, espionage, this might be the one for you. And then I read Emma by Alexander McCall Smith. This apparently is part of the Jane Austen project. I didn't know this when I picked this up. Modern retelling of Jane Austen's Emma. And he did a pretty good job. I ended up giving this 3.5 stars. I think it's really hard to do a modern retelling of Jane Austen. And I recently watched a video. Berna from Berna's Bookish Adventures read Sense and Sensibility from this project by Joanna Trollope, and I haven't read that one yet, but she made an interesting comment about how it's difficult to do a modern retelling of Jane Austen's work, because so much of her work is, I mean, the sensibilities of the time in which she lived and how people behaved. And how do you translate that into modern day, because it's so very different. So Alexander McCall Smith, I think he did a pretty good job. It seems to me one interesting thing was, even though it was a modern retelling of Emma, there was much more about Mr. Woodhouse in this book, which I found very interesting. Like, you were almost tempted to think of him as the main character, I think. And you got so much of him, and in this book, he's still a hypochondriac and still so focused on health and all that stuff. And in a really interesting way, I think, in this book. And Emma was a pretty good character. She was pretty close to how she was in the original. But I think there's always going to be the fact that it's not Emma, that it's not Jane Austen's Emma. And I don't know if there's any author in the world who can get past that, but it was pretty good. And I marked one section because I read this one paragraph, and I realized to myself, reading it, I've read quite a lot of Alexander McCall Smith's work. He writes the #1 Ladies Detective Agency. He writes a couple series set in Scotland. He writes a lot of series, and I've read quite a lot of his work, and so I'm quite familiar with his writing, with his style. And I read one paragraph, and it's on page 181, and I thought to myself, if someone read to me just this paragraph with no context, and I had absolutely no idea what book they were reading to me, I would have been able to tell them in an instant that that was Alexander McCall Smith. He is so distinctive in his writing style. I'm going to read it to you, and let me know what you think down in the comments below. If you're familiar with Alexander McCall Smith, would you say the same thing, that if you heard this, would you know immediately who wrote it? And it's a conversation between Mrs. Goddard and Emma, and this is Mrs. Goddard. She looked at Emma. We get the occasional American missionary coming to the door. They're usually very polite young men from Utah, and they wear peculiar underpants. Did you know that, Emma? Those very courteous and well-behaved young men wear unusual underpants called temple garments. I've never seen them, of course, because those young men are quite unlike our own youths who wear their underpants half outside their trousers. You'll have noticed that. Who could miss it? Those young men with their underpants showing, they aren't even builders. Builders are entitled to wear visible underpants. It goes with the job. Perhaps that's the great service the American missionaries could do us. Rather than converting us to anything, they could get our young men to tuck their underpants back inside where they should be. That would be a great achievement, and we'd all be so grateful to them for doing it. So yeah, Alexander McCall Smith and Emma. And then I read the next in the Kate Shackleton series. I've been reading this series. This is the third one by Frances Brody, called Murder in the Afternoon. And in this one, Kate Shackleton gets disrupted extremely early in the morning. It's like 4 in the morning or something, and this woman's pounding on her door and demanding that she come and help them out. And Kate Shackleton is like, who are you, and why should I come? And this girl admits that she's her sister. So Kate has known for most of her life that she's adopted, but she's never bothered to find anything out about her birth family. And this woman that bursts into her house is apparently her birth sister. And this woman's husband has gone missing, and she is basically demanding that Kate comes and helps her out. So her husband is a mason, and he was working on a Saturday afternoon on a sundial for a man in the village. A colonel wanted this sundial made for his wife, and so this man was working on the sundial, and his 2 children arrived to bring him some supper, and his oldest, his daughter, discovers him dead on the floor, and so she goes running for help, but by the time they get back, his body is gone. And the police do not believe the little girl. Everyone just assumes that this man has taken off, and so Kate is investigating. This one was still pretty good. I really enjoy this series, and I'm definitely keeping up with the series, but this has been my least favorite so far. I gave this 3.5 stars, and I think that it's because the author got so caught up in her secondary plot line, which is the story of Kate and her birth family, that she neglected her main plot line, which is the mystery, which is primarily why I'm reading this book. And so the plot could have been tighter, and there could have been also a little more explanation at the end, and I think that was the case of the author just got maybe bored with the mystery plot line. She was too interested in the other plot line to really kind of pull it all together tightly. So I gave this one 3.5 stars. I still liked it, and I'm definitely reading the next in the series. And then I read Lasting Damage by Sophie Hannah. This is a book that I picked up for 25 cents. I've never read any in the series. This is apparently the 6th one in the series, the Culver Valley Police. I'm not sure what it's called. But it's, so the series is set in Cambridge, or that area of the country. And so I was at first a little bit confused, because apparently in this series, there's a lot of information given about the detectives on this squad and their private lives, and I wasn't aware of any of it, so I found some of that a little bit confusing. But the main plot line itself was fascinating. So in this book, Connie Boskill is looking at a virtual tour of a property at like 1 o'clock in the morning. And it's a property in Cambridge. And as she's watching this virtual tour, she sees in the living room this woman lying on the ground in a pool of blood. And Connie is freaking out. So she goes to wake up her husband, and he goes in to take a look and doesn't see anything. So then the question becomes, who do you believe? Do you believe this woman at 1 o'clock in the morning, or do you believe the husband who said there was nothing there? And everybody else who looks at that virtual tour does not see a dead body. And so it's just a fascinating premise. And this was a really big book. It was like over 500 pages. And I think that's because she goes into a lot of detail about the detectives on the squad and their personal lives. And I didn't care about that part, but that's because I've never read any of the others in the series. So I gave that kind of a, I just kind of ignored that. Like I didn't let that lower my rating of the story, because I didn't know how important that was in the series, having only just read this one. But the story itself, the main characters, Connie and her husband Kit, and Connie's family, these people are messed up. Like in this book, Connie is apparently just completely losing her mind. She discovered months before, she discovered in her husband's car, she drove her husband's car one day, and when she pressed home on his sat nav, it sent her to 11 Bentley Grove. And that is where months later she's looking at the virtual tour and sees the dead body in the living room. And so she's like becoming obsessed with trying to find out if her husband's been having an affair with her. Is her husband a murderer? But nobody believes her. And even her husband, he does not admit to putting that address in his sat nav. And so she's like really second guessing herself. Is she going crazy? What is going on? And so yeah, this book, like she's going like slowly mad. Her family is a bit crazy. Like she's got a sister who is married with a child, and she works part-time as a bookkeeper for her parents' business. Her parents are clingy. Like they're like a type of family that like insists on seeing their children pretty much every day and being like excessively involved in their lives. And so that part was like, anyway, but so everybody was just a little bit off, it seemed, in this book. And so it was hard to know what was really going on. And that was probably on purpose by the author. But this book was twisted. And I didn't actually guess the full story. And that's because it was so twisted. Anyway, I really enjoyed this book. I gave it 4 stars as well. And so that's what I've been reading recently. Have you read any of these books? I'd love to hear your thoughts. Let's talk about them in the comment section down below, and I will see you for another video soon. Bye.